I got 2 or 3 messages from people asking me to talk about the Billy Joe Saunders versus Amir Khan potential matchup that was actually suggested as a fight that Billy Joe Saunders would be interested in following on from his recent fight against Willie Monroe Jr. Saunders himself actually raised it in the post-fight press conference to that matchup. So in this video I'm going to talk about whether or not that happens and if it did happen, what I think the result would be. I guess let me start by saying for Billy Joe Saunders, he can't really be changing weight divisions right now. I've speculated on the channel before that he could potentially campaign at light middleweight, and I saw his trainer Dominic Ingle speculating that he could make that weight as well. But what Billy Joe Saunders has is very, very valuable. Sometimes people have a world title belt and it isn't so valuable. But Billy Joe Saunders' world title belt is extremely valuable because you know, when Canelo and Triple G fight, if there's to be a rematch there, that person will not be able to say they are the undisputed middleweight champion unless they have Billy Joe Saunders' belt. So that belt represents unparalleled earning opportunity and potential for Billy Joe Saunders. So he can't really drop to light middleweight to try and fight Amir Khan for risk of, you know, that affecting his status as the middleweight champion. I suspect if this fight were to happen, Amir Khan would have to campaign at middleweight for the fight, although potentially it could be done at a catch weight around the 155 mark, I guess. You know, so that Amir isn't hugely disadvantaged by the weight, and Billy Joe is still technically fighting at middleweight, being that 155 is above the light middleweight limit. There are reasons why this fight should happen for both guys. From Billy Joe Saunders' perspective, he's lost a huge amount of momentum in his career. He's been very, very inaccurate. As we know, he beat Chris Eubank Jr., but since then, Chris Eubank Jr.'s profile has risen to completely new heights, whereas Billy Joe Saunders' has floundered. And being frank, Eubank Jr. would be the far more recognisable boxer to the public at this stage of his career than Billy Joe Saunders. A fight with Amir Khan would be another big name on Billy Joe's resume. It would be a fight that would captivate people, it would generate interest, and it would allow Billy Joe to very much be in the public eye, more so than he's been in his recent fights. So from Billy Joe's perspective, I guess it makes sense very much from that perspective. You know, and I guess you could have a similar benefit to Amir Khan, although I would say Amir Khan is a far bigger name than Billy Joe Saunders. But Khan's a guy who's had losses, Khan's a guy who's been inactive, and a fight of this magnitude would certainly propel Amir Khan back into the spotlight and make him being talked about for the right reasons, rather than, you know, his Twitter ramblings that Anthony Joshua is potentially befriending his ex-wife. Where I have concerns about this fight happening is Amir Khan is probably only going to be looking for very, very, very big money matchups in his career going forward. Khan has earned very well in his career to date, and Khan potentially has a few very expensive years ahead of him, especially if he's going to be getting a high-profile divorce. So Amir Khan, given that he's at the stage of his career where it's possible his best days are behind him, and given he's at the stage of his career where he may only have 2 or 3 fights left, maybe even 1 or 2 big fights left, he's probably going to want the very, very big fights, the Miguel Cottos, the Manny Pacquiao's. He's going to want the fights where he can earn big paydays, and by big paydays I mean 3, 4, 5 million pounds. Maybe Cal Brook, maybe that's a fight he'll look at as he comes towards the end of his career. Billy Joe Saunders is a big name, and it's a fight Khan could generate money from, but let's be frank, Billy Joe Saunders struggled to sell out the Copper Box the other week. Billy Joe Saunders has not got a track record of selling pay-per-views. Whilst Billy Joe Saunders would generate interest and the fight would be a big domestic class, it's not going to be globally of the same appeal as a Khan Pacquiao or as a Khan Cotto, for example. Billy Joe Saunders doesn't yet have that name recognition and that CV of selling tickets and selling pay-per-views. So for that reason, I suspect Amir Khan would be inclined not to take the fight. I suspect he's going to go straight in for bigger money fights. And I do also suspect that Amir Khan may have learnt from his fight against Canelo that fighting up at the higher weight class is potentially not for him. It may well be a better fit for Amir Khan to consider taking on welterweights, maybe to fight a guy like Cal Brook at 147, rather than fighting a guy who's been active in a division that's clearly above the ideal weight division for Amir Khan and for his frame. That's just my perspective on it though. I think whilst it would be a great fight for Billy Joe Saunders in terms of his public recognition and in terms of him being involved in a big fight, I actually think Amir Khan's profile is at an altogether higher place, and despite the fact he's been inactive, I think there would probably be bigger money and bigger profile fights out there for Khan as opposed to Billy Joe Saunders. So my suspicion is that the fight doesn't happen. I don't think the fight does happen. I think it would be an intriguing matchup. I think they're two big personalities. They're two increasingly controversial characters. And I think there would be a lot of storylines to the fight that would make it very, very interesting. Who do I think would win? I would think Billy Joe Saunders will win. And that's a comment that may potentially, I'm not sure if that would be the public consensus or not, because Billy Joe, a lot of people thought he was very, very boring and average against against Willie Monroe Jr. He was very average against Akavov in the fight previously, and I wonder if people think that Amir Khan has an altogether higher skill set and class. For what it's worth, I think Billy Joe Saunders is underrated, and whilst Billy Joe Saunders isn't the biggest puncher in the world, he's certainly not a Golovkin or a Canelo in terms of power. Amir Khan, up at middleweight, you're probably not going to need to be the biggest puncher in the world to stop him. I think that Amir Khan may have certain advantages in the fight, but I think Billy Joe Saunders is a fast guy. I think Billy Joe Saunders is a guy who has good combinations from the outside, a good jab, and I don't think that Amir Khan's advantages in the fight would be as pronounced as some of the advantages he's enjoyed against fighters like Canelo, for example. Now, Canelo may well be a better fighter than Billy Joe Saunders, don't get me wrong, but stylistically what I'm saying is the success that Amir Khan had against Canelo, I'm not entirely certain he'd have the same success against Billy Joe. I think Billy Joe is a very, very skilled boxer from the outside. I think Amir Khan is in the autumn of his career. I think he's had a hard career. He's had a lot of fights. He's been in boxing for a very, very long time. God, it feels like yesterday that he was fighting in the Olympics at 17 years of age. But at this stage of his career, I just wonder if that punch resistance, which has always been in question, is potentially more in question than ever before. He's had some tough fights. He's had fights that were very, very tough, grueling fights early on in his career, where he wasn't actually stopped, but he was hurt, and those took things out of him. I'm talking like the Marcus Maidana fight, for example. More recently, he suffered bad knockouts, and you guys all know what I'm talking about here. Danny Garcia, obviously Canelo Alvarez, that was a very bad knockout that Amir Khan suffered. And whilst Billy Joe isn't the biggest puncher in the world, that's being measured against him fighting middleweights. That's being measured against him fighting guys like Chris Eubank Jr. and Andy Lee and those sort of guys. Let's not forget he dropped Andy Lee heavily twice as well. So, whilst Billy Joe may not be the biggest puncher against that sort of opposition, the power that he has showed may well be enough to once again hurt Amir Khan and potentially force a stoppage against Amir Khan if a fight were to be made between the two. So, in summary, my suspicion is that the fight doesn't get made. I think if it were to be made, it's an intriguing fight that would appeal to the public. But I just wonder if Amir Khan is in a position where he won't be looking to campaign at the higher weight classes. And I wonder if Amir Khan is thinking he's only got one or two big fights left. I think he'll prioritise the big money fights against fighters who have a track record of selling out arenas and who have a track record of selling a vast number of pay-per-views. For example, I don't see why he would fight Billy Joe Saunders when he could fight Saunders' stablemate Kell Brook. I imagine Kell Brook would be 2, 3, 4 times the payday. The history there would probably make the pay-per-view buys a hell of a lot higher than they would if Amir Khan was to fight Billy Joe Saunders. And whilst I'm not sure that Kell Brook is a good matchup for Amir Khan, at least they've been operating in a similar weight division rather than Billy Joe, who has routinely spent his career operating 2 divisions above Amir Khan. If the fight were to happen, whilst it's a fight that I can see people making a case for Khan in, I'd be going with Billy Joe Saunders based on size and really based on the fact that I think Amir Khan, with his punch resistance, would struggle fighting a guy who's a genuine middleweight. Let me know your thoughts. Have I got it wrong? Do you think the fight will happen? Have I got it wrong? Do you think Amir Khan will win? Drop your comments in the section below. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit the thumbs up button. If you haven't done so before, for whatever reason, do take the time to subscribe. If you want to support the channel, you can also follow me on Twitter using the Twitter handle @BoxingGossip, and there's also a link in the description box below to add me as a friend on Facebook, so you can keep up to date with my various goings on and new videos and that sort of thing. Other than that, all that's left for me to say is many thanks as always for tuning in. Thanks for watching the channel, and yeah, appreciate it, guys.